guys, welcome to the Fenton Perspective here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com and also replayed over at Michael Vara's Late Night in the Midlands Radio, WCET.com, and also at American Guardian network. And I'm going to look it up again one more time, just make sure I'm saying it correctly for you guys. New network, the American Alert Guardians with Jerry Dean and Brett. And want to thank all of these guys for replaying my shows. I guess truck drivers are calling me and emailing me saying they're hearing me in the middle of nowhere all the time now. So I start laughing because everybody replays me in the middle of the night. I guess I'm not ready for prime time. I don't know what it is, but I think it's great and I'm happy. And thank you, Solaris, for helping me, and AMAD, you as well. I really appreciate you guys out there helping me out because you know I don't have a producer here. I'm my own producer, which is no one should have given me that job, but I'm living it up. I'm living up to it. Okay. Well, let's see. What did I want to rant about today? You guys have no clue. I got to tell you, it's insanity. Okay, I got to get this off my chest because I'm ready to burst. I have bronchitis, and I've had it for about 2 or 3 weeks. It's probably gone into pneumonia by now, but luckily, I finally got azithromycin on Friday, and I'm taking the pills, and I'm feeling a lot better, like 50, 75% better already in just a couple of days taking these drugs. And, you know, sometimes you just have to take them. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And it took me 2 or 3 weeks to get my doctor to give me the medicine that I needed, that I knew I needed, but they kept telling me I had COVID and I had to come into the clinic, which meant they were going to put me on a list that said I couldn't leave my house for at least 14 days, if not a month. And that meant I couldn't go to work and I couldn't go to the office that nobody's in, that I'm in the middle of the night and there's nobody there with me. I'm all alone, that I wasn't allowed to do that. Because I asked them, I said, can I go to my office and work even if I have been sick with COVID and all that? Oh, no, you can't go in. You'll spread COVID all over the place. And I'm like, well, if I'm spreading COVID all over the place, then no one sits at my desk and I'm the only one who goes there. And there's hand sanitizer all over. If they want, you know, if they're going to sit at my desk, they're all hand sanitizered up. What difference does it make? I mean, I don't even get this. I'm like so confused. And so we battled, and you guys, I've been battling my doctor. I haven't seen a doctor in person since a year ago because I refused to answer the 3 questions. And we've talked about this on the show. The 3 questions are very simple. Have you been out of the country and come back in recently? And you're supposed to say no, because if you say yes, then they're going to contact trace you and lock you up for a month, right? And then the second question was, let's see, have you had all the symptoms, the headache, the diarrhea, this, that, blah, 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 fever? I think there was 4 other things on that list. And I, you know, of course, I'm not going to tell them I've got any of those things, so I can go into the hospital, right? And then the third thing is, have you been around anybody with COVID? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, the whole world's got it, or they all don't have it. I don't know, because you guys can't tell me if it even exists. So I don't know, you know, what is the answer to that question? Because, you know, everybody has coronavirus in them. So really, I mean, you're asking me that question, and I have been fighting with them, my doctors at, I go to a clinic and I get cheap health insurance through the state and through Medicare and all that stuff. And I'm telling you guys, it's just been a nightmare. I mean, they've literally blocked me from going in. They put the administrative director in front of my face, pushing me out the door. I mean, it is insanity. I told them I will wear a mask, which I had on the very first time we had our confrontation. And I said, I will wear a mask and I will stay 6 feet away from everybody just for my doctor, okay? I will not do it for anything else except for getting on a plane when I have to, and that's it. I mean, I don't go to the stores, and when I do, I don't wear a mask, and they yell at me, and then I'm in there for 3 seconds, and I have to buy my stuff and get out. I mean, that's how bad it is here in California. It's just a nightmare. And my guest today is going to tell you guys a little more about what's happened to her around all this. But anyhow, I'm just telling you guys, it's been nuts. I won't say no to those questions, and here's why. And I'm going to repeat myself again to all of you who listen to me on a regular basis. Everybody lies to those questions that wants to seek treatment? Are you going to tell them, oh yeah, I've been really sick and blah, blah, blah. I mean, or I've been out of the country. I just snuck over the border again for the fifth time to get back to my bus keeping job. And I've got bronchitis, or I got a fungal infection, or I got something, and I need to see a doctor, but I may have COVID too, but I'm not going to tell them I just got back over the border. Why would I do that? They'd never see me. I'd be locked up for 14 days or a month, and I wouldn't be able to get back to my job. So why would you answer yes? I mean, it's all a game, and they're not doing it right, because I was in statistics a long time ago in the computer industry. I'm not going to go into detail, but if you want to contact trace people, you do it from the top down. You don't do it from the bottom up. In other words, at the top are the sick people, and then you backtrack to who they've been around. That's how you do it. You don't do it with people that are supposedly healthy and figure out where they've been and who they've been around, because you don't know if anybody else is sick or not. You only do it from the sick people back. I mean, this is nuts. This is nuts. It doesn't make any sense. It's not even scientific. I mean, it's just crazy. And my doctor did have a good point. She goes, well, most people don't lie to us. And I said, well, that's a nice thought. I mean, most people don't lie, period, but some people do. So where's are they just saying, okay, for 45% of the data or 33% of the data, we're going to assume they're lying? I mean, I guess that's okay, but then you're missing a whole chunk of the population that need to be contact traced that aren't getting contact traced. So really, what is the point? I don't understand it, and I've got to find an attorney that will go with me to the clinic and say, when they ask me the questions, stand there and say she doesn't have to answer these questions according to her constitutional rights or freedoms or whatever it may be, and put these people in their place. Because if we don't stop them from doing this, it's going to continue and continue and continue, and it's not going to be just COVID. It's going to be everything. It's going to be every flu, every H1N1, everything that comes back again that they think is real and is a problem. And then we're just going to end up in the same position like I'm in right now. And my doctor's, here's the final kick to this. I just got to say this to you guys. My doctor was actually pleading with me on the phone Friday. She says, Lorraine, just answer the questions. I mean, that's exactly how she said it to me. She says, just answer it so I can treat you. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I said, I can't do it. She goes, why can't you? I said, because I'm an American citizen and my freedoms are being trampled, and I'm not going to play the game that you guys are putting out there that we all have to do what you tell us to do. I said, you're my doctor. You're not my jailer. And I said, that's what you're acting like, and I'm not doing it. And she was very upset with me, and she hung up, and she was mad, but she gave me my prescription finally. So I did get my azithromycin. So thank God for that. Oh, and here's one other thing she did say to me that really torqued me. I was really pissed when she said this. She goes, how can you self-diagnose what you have? She goes, I'm sure you've got COVID. And I said to her, well, I've had COVID. I know what COVID feels like, and this is not COVID. This is the same bronchial pneumonia or upper respiratory infection I always get every year about this time, and I know exactly what it feels like. And I'm telling you, this is not COVID, because if that was COVID I had a year ago, if COVID really does exist, I was wishing I was dead. That's how bad that stuff was. So whatever I had, be COVID or not, who knows? But I was so sick that honestly, you guys, you can tell the difference. And for her to treat me like I couldn't tell the difference, without a swab. Oh, that's the other thing I won't do. I won't let them put that thing up my nose. And she's furious about that. And I said, look, you can take a blood test, because a blood test will show you that I've got antibodies to it because I had it a year ago. So there you go. But I can't go into the clinic to get the antibody test because they won't let me in to draw my blood. So we're at a bypass right now, and I'm just sitting here waiting for them to deal with it. Oh, I need a tooth pulled. I can't get that pulled because I won't go into I won't answer the questions. And it's just, you guys, I can't believe that I'm actually sitting here at 63 years old having to tell you this story, because it is just ludicrous what they're doing to the poor people in this in the state of California, for sure. What they're doing to all of us who are on this like Obamacare. It's absolutely ludicrous. I can't believe it. And I just, maybe the rich people can go to doctors who don't ask them the questions. I don't know, but I'm not one of those people. So I don't know how it's playing out for them. But I can guarantee you this. I bet they don't have to do what we do. Just like Gavin Newsom can go to a restaurant and eat dinner and we can't. I'm sure they're being taken care of just fine and they don't have to answer any questions unless they feel like it. So there we have it. Okay. I have got the most amazing guest with me today. She's turned into quite a friend, and I appreciate her, and she has got the biggest heart of all the people I know out there fighting the battle. Her name is Judy Mikovits. She is the author of Plague of Corruption with Kent Heckenlively, and they have, gosh, Judy, how many versions are out now? Are we on the third one?
Yes, well, yeah, we've got Plague, Ending Plague, Plague of Corruption, and Ending Plague is our third one, and that should be out later this spring. We're finishing it now. We're like 90% finished, but it's a little difficult the book is called Ending Plague, A Scholar's Obligation in an Age of Corruption. And
wow.
You can see it out for pre-sale on Amazon. And it's, as usual, it's me, Kent Heckenlively, but this time the lead author, and it really is his book. His primary story is Dr. Frank Rossetti, my mentor of 37 years. And so really, Frank Rossetti knows all, and Frank Rossetti has never spoken and never talked. So this one, his title was A Scholar's Obligation in an Age of Corruption of the book. We added Ending Plague, and he's a cynic, ever the cynic. He tells me a cynic is a romantic who's been hurt by life. And I think somebody else said that a long time ago, but that's what he's always said. And so he always says Frank, ever the cynic, because he knows all of us are being lied to. So he doesn't like Ending Plague because he doesn't think we can ever end the plague as long as the power structure is set up the way it is. A scholar's obligation, usually honoring a scholar's obligation, usually results in death.
Yeah,
or
that's
destruction
for sure.
of your career. So yes. So
yeah, if it's not a physical death, it's a death by 1,000 cuts, as they say.
Like my career. So
yes.
or in his case, his son's career, who his son is in the family business, as he says. So it'll be interesting, and it's a little hard. We had hoped the book would be out like in early April, just like last year's book, because it's been mostly written, as Kent Heckenlively has taped, my story, and my story has always for 37 years intertwined Frank's story. So as we wrote each of the last two books, Plague and Plague of Corruption, Frank says, take that out of there. That's my book. And so we've got it all on paper, and it's just a matter of our Frank is our Frank, and we love him.
Well, people may or may not know your story, Judy. So I guess we're going to have to start from the beginning. I hate doing that to you every show, but I have different audiences in different places, and I never know who really knows who you are. So I think we should start with you telling the story about how you got into the business, and you were working with Rossetti, and then Fauci appears, his ugly little head appears, as I always say, and then your life gets turned upside down. If you could just kind of recap it in 10 or 15 minutes, that would be great.
Oh, sure. So it's really pretty simple. And in the books, our books, Plague and Plague of Corruption, and again, Ending Plague, will just go into more detail. They talk about I basically started my career when I was a kid. My parents were divorced when I was 10 years old, so I moved to Washington, D.C., right in the heart of Washington, D.C., 417 Constitution Avenue. And we were living with my grandparents in the house where my mother was raised, born there, right in the heart of DC. So we live steps from the Capitol. So it really matters. And we used to run through the tunnels under Congress and things like that, and spent all our time in Smithsonian. Just had a blast living in Washington. But shortly after we moved there, my grandfather got lung cancer, and in 1970, I would say it was probably 68. I was 10 years old. I'm your age, born in 58. And so he got lung cancer, and it was a closet disease, and nobody had cancer then. Cancer was rare. Now it's 1 in 2. And so, of course, they blamed it on smoking cigarettes. And we realized years later it wasn't only smoking cigarettes, it was that asbestos in the Fruit Growers Express. He worked on the railroad. He worked in the refrigeration car. So they were spraying asbestos. So, of course now, cigarette smoking causes lung cancer. And yet we all know people in this particular type of lung cancer, of this non-small cell lung cancer, the oat cell cancer. We all know now there are many types of lung cancer associated with asbestos as well as cigarette smoking, and we can distinguish those molecularly. But at the time, basically he ended up dying very quickly, and this was just devastating to me because he was the only one that cared about baseball in my family, and I just love baseball. So long story short, I thought that we could cure cancer by nutrition, good nutrition, plants, medicine. Where our heritage is, his family is Cherokee Indian. So our Indian, our Native American heritage, they would literally heal themselves. And always had. I had aunts, and my Aunt Susie, we called her Aunt Susie. She lived to 108. So our family was always very, very healthy, and nobody ever got cancer. And that's true to this day. So I thought you could heal them with plants. So I studied nutritional, I called it nutritional biochemistry, but my undergraduate degree was in chemistry with a specialization in biology at the University of Virginia, where I graduated May 18th of 1980. And what was important about that is it was so long ago, they didn't even have a biochemistry program. So we didn't know about asbestos. We didn't know about anything else. It was just a situation where, you could heal with plants. And I went straight to the National Cancer Institute, where my first job was to purify type 1 interferon, a human biological response modifier protein. And of course, animals like cows and pigs and have interferons as well. And so that was sort of my first taste of biological responses. And so also my first taste of the plague of corruption there at the National Cancer Institute, because right around that time, Dr. Frank Rossetti and his colleague Bernie Poise had isolated the first human retrovirus, and it was the causative agent of a very aggressive cancer called ATL, adult T-cell leukemia. And we were asked in my department, I didn't know Frank. He wasn't at Frederick Cancer Research Facility, where I worked basically as a hired gun, purifying drugs and giving them to the researchers who ran the clinical trials. So he was, I was ordered by, Bob Gallo to grow hundreds of liters of type 1 of human T-cell leukemia lymphoma virus, the first, again, human retrovirus, and it was causative for this aggressive T-cell leukemia. And what that meant is every person with evidence of infection with the virus had the disease. So that's when you can say cause, and it's really important, all of this, to what we're seeing today. Anyway, so I refused to, my boss and I, very young, my boss was 30. I was, maybe 22 or 3. And my boss had just gotten his PhD. And I was just a BA level technician. And we refused to do this because in order to purify this and deliver it to Robert Gallo, we had to use what was called a K centrifuge, an open air centrifuge. So taking large fermenters like these craft brewing, things we see in craft breweries, and ferment and grow these animal cells and grow up, lots and lots. They were actually human cells. Human Hut 102 was the cell line. It was a cell line that came from a guy named Charles Robinson, a black man with the virus and the disease. So I'll keep saying that because with SARS-CoV-2, anybody with evidence, most 99.8% of the people with evidence of the virus have no evidence of the disease, and yet the industry keeps calling it causative. Anyway, so we grew this up, but my complaint was it was an open air centrifuge. We knew nothing about the transmissibility of these viruses. We knew nothing about whether or not you could catch them. Could you catch contagious cancer? This is what they worried about in my grandfather's day in 1968, that cancer could somehow be contagious associated with viruses. And of course, we know from Frank's work and our work now, of course they can. And now, of course, you can even transmit through coughing contagious viruses. So we wrote a letter to the Washington Post, always the troublemaker. I got in trouble. And soon after, when Ronald Reagan took office, I guess it was 82 or so, or 1980, whenever it was after President Carter, but 82, and Ronald Reagan had promised in his campaigns that he was going to reduce the size of the federal government. So he made everybody contractors and put them in industry. So he didn't really reduce the size of the federal government. So I got a letter saying I was riffed. That was a reduction in force. And then, they basically hired somebody back into my job. They said they didn't need a biochemist anymore, and I was the only protein chemist in the entire program. But of course, this was the penalty for writing a letter to the Washington Post and telling them the unsafe practices that were happening at Fort Detrick and Frederick Cancer Research. Well,
what?
Yeah, it goes way. This is all going to be an ending plague. You're going to see how far this plague of corruption goes back. And I haven't told this story to many people, so at any rate, always can't. But at any rate, this is. I went looking for a job because I no longer had a job. Met somebody who talked about Dr. Joe Oppenheim, who talked about cytokines. He and his laboratory had discovered IL-1 and interleukin-8, these cytokines and chemokines that were so important to the career. I heard a seminar, and I went up to him after the seminar, dumb kid, and basically said, "Hey, I think those things can cure cancer." And he introduced me to Frank Rossetti, and the 37-year relationship Frank calls purgatory was started on June 6, 1983. So D-Day 1983, I started working for Frank Rossetti and essentially have never stopped talking to him on any level about science. I worked for him directly for the next 11 years, except for a very brief stint that I left the National Cancer Institute and I went to Upjohn in Michigan. And my job in Michigan was to prove that bovine growth hormone, a GMO product, it was called bovine somatostatin, it had other names. My job was to set up a tissue culture facility, a biological facility there in the quality control, and basically prove that bovine growth hormone did nothing to hurt human cells, that this GMO food did nothing to hurt human cells. Well, of course, exactly the opposite was true. It did great damage to human fat metabolism and other things. And of course, came along with a number of viral contaminants in the growth hormones. So, I didn't stay in that job very long when I refused to cover that up. So I started graduate school I called Frank when I kind of got in trouble. That's all in Plague of Corruption. And I called Frank and said, okay,
Right.
so
I remember that part. Yeah.
yeah, when I had started working for Frank, I had said I would never say the G word. So we would never say the G word in our laboratory. I would never say gallo, and he would never say graduate school, because throughout my undergraduate career, the misogyny, professors who did not
Right.
want women to go to medical school. So really the theme of my career, and the theme that went through all the way through cancer research, and then the most important story of in 2006, I first saw people with chronic fatigue syndrome, and quickly remembered the history of HIV, and the work of Peter Duesberg, who said HIV didn't cause AIDS. That is what my PhD thesis showed at the biological level in 1991. I defended it November 14th, 1991, and it basically said you could have HIV and never get AIDS. If
Right.
you treated it, if you prophylactically treated it. And we would have been treating it with things like milk thistle for the liver. Oh,
Right.
cannabis for the emaciation. If you kept the macrophages, peptide T, a non-toxic peptide, designed by Candace Burt and her husband, and I did the work in Frank Rossetti's lab as a technician, and there with Frank Rossetti, and there to validate it biologically, and the control population for those experiments were people with ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, which was how Tony Fauci had stigmatized this. So here
So,
we were
Judy,
all the way back then.
just for the people who don't understand the correlation between the two, HIV and chronic fatigue syndrome are basically the same thing. Am I correct?
No, AIDS, chronic fatigue. So HIV is the virus that the government said was causing AIDS, which
Right.
is acquired immune deficiencies.
Okay.
Now, some people had women and children and hospital workers, doctors, nurses were getting the same immunological abnormalities, the T cell dysfunction, the dysregulated type 1 interferon responses, that first job of mine. So you were seeing, and in fact, COVID, basically long haul COVID. They've just renamed ME/CFS. But what was the problem? Well, the government was saying, Fauci and Gallo were saying chronic fatigue syndrome was just a bunch of crazy women, and they weren't sick.
Right.
And because they had the T cell abnormalities, the natural killer cell abnormalities, immune abnormalities that were acquired immune deficiency dysfunction, and similar to people with HIV, but they weren't gays. They weren't IV drug users.
Right.
They weren't prostitutes. And what were we told as a society in the Bill Clinton era? Oh,
Right.
You can't spread HIV with a blowjob. Oh, the hell you can. And I isolated that virus from saliva of men with AIDS. I guarantee you can. But we were culture as a culture. We were made to believe, and when the data said anything but, because these people, for all intents and purposes, had AIDS, but they had no evidence of HIV.
Right,
So this is a big.
this is where my brain gets confused,
Yeah.
because I think they're basically the same thing, just a little like cousins.
No, and this is so HIV is the infection.
Oh, okay.
AIDS is
Very
the
good.
disease.
Okay.
SARS-CoV-2 is the infection. COVID-19 is the disease. And the government today, you could see it everywhere, and the media and everybody, the scientific journals, they use them interchangeable, and they're not the same thing. And it's criminal fraud. It's criminal fraud because they've been perpetrating it for 40 years. And they literally, so what happened in the 80s then? Well, what happened was Ryan White, Arthur Ashe, have your audience go see, and you rewatch the movie the band played on from 1993, I believe, with Alan Alda, 2 years after I defended my PhD thesis defense, which proved at the molecular biology level, we didn't have a lot of cloning. We didn't have a lot of things at that time. I wasn't a molecular virologist at that time. That was my postdoc, was molecular virology. This was cell biology and biochemistry. My PhD came from the department at George Washington, biochemistry and molecular biology, where I use that knowledge gained from the natural products. And said at the time, we were told the people were told not to take these dangerous drugs. Watch the movie The Dallas Buyers Club.
Right.
Matthew McConaughey got did he win an Academy Award for that?
I can't remember. I can't.
I'm
but
not
he
a
did.
real movie
I think I know he
person,
was up for it. I know that he was up for the Academy Award, but I don't remember if he won or not. But anyhow, it was a great movie.
Right. So this is
Is David answering the question
David,
for
honey,
us?
answer the question, sweetie. Yes, he is. So at any rate, my husband. At any rate, so this, our books tell this story in much this way because it's not linear. You really needed to know history. You really needed to have been there, have done that, have been in that lab and observed the plague of corruption. Frank and I worked together literally for 22 years while I was at the National Cancer Institute after I left Upjohn and came back. And that's all told in the stories told in Plague of Corruption. And went to graduate school. At that time, what we knew was only 1 in 10,000 T cells were infected with HIV, and yet all of them were dying. And what the stupid doctors used to call this is bystander effects. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Come on, there's a shooter. There are other cells in the immune system, and that means that the central cell that is driving the disease, or the central pathology driving the disease, is not the T cell, and it's not HIV causing it. And that if you can keep it, and it turned out to be the monocyte macrophage. That was my work. That was my PhD. It ended up having 2 or 3, 4 seminal papers associated with it by the time they finally got published within the decade or so of me publishing or defending my PhD. People, you saw in the movie Plandemic, her PhD wasn't anything. Oh, she didn't do anything. Oh no, it was groundbreaking work, and the publications, the journals, they refused to publish our papers. They said,
Right.
"Oh, you had contaminated cultures. Oh, you have no evidence of that. Oh, you're an idiot. NF-kappa B is a cytoplasmic protein before anybody knew there was I-kappa B, the inhibitor of kappa B that held bound to NF-kappa B in the cytoplasm, was a hair trigger release once phosphorylated, drove it to the nucleus." So all I showed was that HIV infected people with NF-kappa B in the nucleus of their cells. And this was part of my PhD work. I took it straight from the people at George Washington, infected people in Washington, D.C. Most were Black transvestites, homosexuals, part of the, again, you start to see, some of what's happening today is that, who's more susceptible to developing disease, AIDS, from an HIV infected, are people whose immune systems have an imbalanced response because they come from other parts of the world, and they have things that we're now calling antibody-dependent enhancement and pathogenic priming. So it's really, this is why it's so important. It's in not really telling you my life history other than that I got a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology. I went on to develop cell lines and models and understand who's the most susceptible. What were the molecular pathways? We identified NF-kappa B. We identified these things, and they wouldn't DNA methylation. So I was looking at a paper we published in 1998, and I literally started the work January of 1992. It was part of my PhD thesis, literally before I got my degree, which was February 16th. 1992 was the degree. I defended my thesis November of 1991. So the graduation was February 16th of 1992. So a little anniversary coming up tomorrow. But at any rate, it's still good, and it's still good, and I'm still right. And see, so what happened was, we knew of chronic fatigue syndrome, but I'd never met the patients. And I knew the biology, but this was it was covered up by Tony Fauci, by all these people. And I moved on into epigenetic regulation of cancer. I got married. In 1999, I led the lab of antiviral drug mechanisms in the screening technologies branch, where we develop diagnostic and therapeutic strategies, to see. So it's not HIV associated malignancies or cancer, it's AIDS associated cancer. So what happens when your immune system is crippled? Why do some people develop, at the time it was glioblastoma, brain tumors and things like that? So understanding associated pathogens and how different parts of the immune systems have to be crippled in order to allow the acquired immune deficiencies, the dysfunction that is cancer. Cancer, autoimmune disease, all of those fit under the umbrella of AIDS. And I now call it acquired endocannabinoid immune dysfunction or deficiency, because when you have an imbalance too much in one pathway, you have a deficiency in another. And we see this, in the diseases like common variable immune deficiency, in many of the vaccine injured, they have what's called common variable immune deficiency, another stupid doctor name. It's common, it's variable. So what it is you don't produce certain subclasses of antibodies. So you don't make IgA, or you don't make IgM, or you don't make IgG according to what part was injured by contaminants we now know in vaccines, including GMOs, including aluminum, including mercury, and things like that. So I didn't know any of this back in 99. I just led the lab of antiviral drug mechanisms. Got married in 2000, got a job in 2001. It literally took me 6 months to leave the National Cancer Institute, because I had been there that long and wanted that program to succeed. And so I would travel back and forth. From California to Washington to Frederick, Maryland, and work on projects. So I worked at Epigenics Pharmaceuticals, a startup company where we developed diagnostic therapeutics drugs based on changing methylation in a way that would turn on tumor suppressor genes, stop cancer, and turn off oncogenes that cause cancer. And so some of those compounds were the quinolones and other compounds, and I'm saying the names of these so those in your audience who do know, and another called decitabine, which would change the methylation, and is used as part of curative strategies for even the pre-metastatic niche in cancer, and all the way back to that very aggressive and deadly adult T-cell leukemia. And what did we know about it? Even though HTLV was causative caused the disease, that is, every person with evidence of the infection had the disease, it wasn't in the T cell. The virus was not in the T cell, just like HIV AIDS. HIV wasn't in the T cell of AIDS patients. It was other dysregulation of the immune system, and it really matters, because the corruption right now, all of these diseases, all of these retrovirus diseases, associated diseases, coming from the aberrant, the bad expression of retroviruses. We now know 8% of our genome is an endogenous silenced retroviruses. So part of my
Right.
PhD thesis was that you could wake up sleeping viruses, sleeping giants, that they could be, that you could wake them up, and it wasn't their presence but the expression. So silence them with by restoring the balance of the methylation machine. You get them methylated and you get them silenced. And yet we've been crippling our methylation machinery, the precursors of methylation. It goes all the way back to nutrients, S-adenosyl methionine. Methionine is one of the and the sulfur containing proteins that glyphosate so cripples the glutathione, cripples the methylation machinery.
Right.
So people can't remethylate their endogenous viruses. And long story short, 911 destroyed the company, Epigenics, because you didn't need cancer diagnostics or treatments if you're going to get blown up tomorrow. So all of the research, or much of the research, was stalled from this startup. We had built a large lab and partnered with a company in Carlsbad, California, where I still have an apartment, and Frank and I retired there as we had built a lab there, and we were going to use these diagnostic strategies and the therapeutics, the quinolones and others, decitabine, to cure cancer. Well, our deals closed, our Series A funding, or whatever they call that. Even a house we bought down there, the closing dates for everything was 9/12/01.
Oh,
so it
no.
crashed exactly. Everybody
no.
pulled out of the markets. It crashed everything. We went back to Santa Barbara and limped along on grants. And it's at that time, around 2005, I met a person there in Montecito, and I won't
Judy,
I won't use her name.
Just
She's
to
evil.
just to cut in for 1 second.
Sure.
So you're basically telling me that you guys were coming up with cures for cancer, and because of 9/11, you got completely side railed.
Well, and we were coming up with cures for cancer all the way back in the biological response modifiers program with Frank Rossetti from 83 to 87. We were using hyperbaric oxygen therapies. We were using peptide T. What did our FDA do? It refused to ever let peptide T see the light of day. What did peptide T's, the control group for peptide T, to see that it was anti-HIV, was chronic fatigue syndrome. And one of the problems was they got well too, which told you that there was another virus involved. So in 2005, I met some patients, and I'm like, it smells like a retrovirus. And so I embarked on this journey, started the first, 2 women with their sick children, 2 very wealthy women and very well-connected women. And they basically, we're going to start their own institute, fund it, and they hired me to set it up from the ground up. And I set it up just like using the systems biology approach in 2006 and early 7. There was no dirt on the ground. They built a building at the University of Nevada, Reno, and I hired I got to collaborate with me, all my old friends. Back in the National Cancer Institute, we got Frank Rossetti, Dennis Taub, they got a grant called an Intramural Neuroimmune Research Program grant. That was, you had to have the Institute of Aging, because what this really is at the big picture is it's accelerated aging. And now we see children with triple negative breast cancers. Now we see all these injuries, all these things kids never get in Western societies. And it begins to link them all back to retroviruses. So they're in 2008 and early 2009, we isolated a a new family. We were the first ever to isolate the XMRVs, a new family of disease-associated retroviruses. Well, why did I call them the XMRVs and say first ever to isolate it? Because in 2006 or so, when I was working with another company, because we did a lot of things when Epigenics went down, I worked with other natural products companies. We did everything we could to get that company solvent in the 5 or 6 years, and we were finally bought out by a large company in Northern California who stole all our technology and gave us nothing. But at any rate, because they knew we had nothing. I mean, it is the plague of corruption, and you can see it in the cancer industry in this company. Literally, I saw them in an AACR, American Association of Cancer Research meeting, and they had all of our work, all of my stuff on the board, their discoveries. And I mean, they literally raped us. They took all our money. They took everything. There were only 4 of us left in the company who did everything. And the guy's like, oh, Judy, I thought you'd be proud, and it's like, you're kidding me. You stole all my work. You called it your own. You made a fortune, and you couldn't even pay us for our work. We lost everything there. And he's like, it's just business, Judy. So, I never, after leaving Frank's lab, worked for an honest scientist again in any business I was at. Never worked for honest people, and right. we'll talk about that a lot in Ending Plague: A Scholar's Obligation.
Oh, good! I'm glad you're putting that in there. It's about time to get exposed.
Exactly, and this is the whole story that we're basically telling. We're telling the whole story because now we see all of it. So we isolated and we submitted this paper for publication associating. So what the people had done in prostate cancer research, where I was developing drugs, and that's all in our other books. I was developing drugs because they're inflammatory. So why some men get more aggressive prostate cancers than others was a biomarker of a certain kind of enzyme called RNA cell, and it breaks down RNA viruses. So it degrades RNA viruses in the blood or anything else. And people with a single nucleotide change in the protein couldn't it's like a Pac-Man. They couldn't chew it fast enough. They were about 50% as effective. That's RNA cell, and that's all in our first book, Plague. So at the scientific level. Well, so we knew, because my stepfather died in 1989 of a very aggressive prostate cancer. His first wife died of a very aggressive breast cancer, and his second wife died of pancreatic cancer. Oh. And what was the virus we isolated from and associated with all of those diseases? XMRVs. And there were many strains, and it goes right to right now. And this is why the plague of corruption, this is why we're so heavily censored. Because we know what they're doing. So what is COVID? COVID is a cover-up of all of the Borrelia, the Babesia, the everything, mycoplasma, mold injected. So that paper, we submitted that paper to the journal May 6, 2009. That was 3 years after we started this institute. We solved ME/CFS. In a large portion of the people that had it. And clinically, you could have said we solved it for all of them, because just as I said at the beginning, it's never one pathogen. So clinically indistinguishable are Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease, and neuroborreliosis. And so the cells talk to each other. It's called war and peace among the microbes. So as Dr. Klinghardt taught me in 2017, I think, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, he taught me, Judy, I've never seen a retrovirus not travel with Babesia. What's working in these SARS-CoV-2 diseases? Oh, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, Suramin worked in the HIVs. So there are other things traveling. It's absolutely clear this recombinant virus, or this virus, SARS-CoV-2, is HIV GP120, the surface unit, the envelope of GP120, the XMRV, the gamma retrovirus surface unit known as syncytin, that is in every one of our human and animal genomes. We express syncytin, and when syncytin is expressed in the brain, it's strongly associated with multiple sclerosis. So what's a
Wow.
woman's disease? And syncytin is necessary for the egg to implant in the uterus. Syncytin means fusion. It fuses cells together. When you look under the microscope, you see syncytia. So, Kent, when he wrote Kent's a sixth grade science teacher. So when he writes these books, he's able to, break it down in a simple story. So he tells of me looking under the microscope. It's not that I would see like an electron micrograph, which is what you need to
Right.
characterize these viruses. But I could see the syncytia. And so I have pictures of the syncytia in our paper.
Judy, if you don't mind, since the breaks aren't working, since the server's down for the commercials, I'm going to take a little commercial break. And if you want to get a glass of water or do something, go right ahead. But I'm going to take a couple minutes here.
Okay,
and I just want to tell everybody that you've got to get Judy's books, because thank God Judy gave me copies of her books. I've made it through some of it. So far, Judy, I haven't had much time to read, but I have been picking it up. It's by the side of the bed. And I'm flabbergasted. Every time I get through a chapter, I'm like, what? Oh my God. You could have been curing cancer for years now, and they won't let you. Okay.
And that's won't let you.
And that's the part that I took away from the last chapter I read. I was so angry, I forgot to call you and tell you that. Anyhow, I want to take a quick break with you guys here, and I just want to say UFOCon is coming up. It is happening. I know that I've been telling that to you guys for weeks now, but as I was telling Judy before the show started tonight, I've been having nothing but major computer problems. I've become very active in the health freedom arena here in the Bay Area, and ever since that started, I've been having a lot of problems with computer systems. So I want to tell you guys, I went into UFOCon the other day to try to get the ticketing system set up for you, and it's not taking. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to work it all out, but I just want to let you know it is happening no matter what. I've got amazing speakers for you. I will tell you that, hi, David. I will tell you guys all, I have a guy speaking for the first time ever about his contact experiences, and he's a very famous Hollywood guy. And a lot of you know about him. His name is Christopher Peters. So look him up. He's the son of John Peters, or I think that's John Peters, who was married to Barbara Streisand and Leslie Ann Warren and all that. And this guy, in the Hollywood community, as a lot of you know, the UFO thing is a great thing to make money on, but you don't want it to happen to you. Okay. So for him to come out and talk about his experiences has been quite extraordinary, I got to say. So he's just one of the people that's going to be at the conference speaking, and I'm so excited to have him. And I also have Jason December, who is the guy that believes that if you invoke the name of Jesus Christ, you can get these alien little guys to leave you alone. And I think he's on to something. So I hope you guys are excited about that too. And just go to UFOCon2021.com. That's UFOCon2021.com and check it out. Give me a couple more days to figure out why the tickets won't go for sale, and they're very affordable, and I hope you guys can make it. It's going to be a fun weekend. I like to have a lot of fun doing this, as well as inform you of other things that have a lot to do with our consciousness and God and other things in our life that we need to be dealing with. So there you go. And the other thing that's happening right now, I just got you guys a quick update on it, is Make Contact TV is coming. And I don't know when, but it will be here soon. And also yesterday I sealed the deal. I am now working with another major player in the JFK community who is going to be starting JFK TV with me. So we're going to, you guys, you have no idea what's coming your way. It's going to be wild. And I've got other secrets I can't tell you right now because I just don't want them to hear about it. Okay. So I'll let you know when that all happens. But the best way to keep in touch with me is go to my website, and that's LorienFenton.com. That's LORIEN. F as in Frank, ENTON.com. And I try to keep things updated there. It's kind of like the cobbler's kids with no shoes. I'm the webmaster, but do I have time to fix my own website? No. So the best way to utilize that is to check out my radio shows and also to be in contact with me through the contact page. The emails do get to me. And if you get the SSL certificate that says this is not a trusted site, ignore it. It is a trusted site. That is how they're trying to take me out right now, you guys. So if that pops up, just go, I accept all the problems, because you're not going to get a virus. You're not going to get anything. And just go on in and you'll be fine. I promise you. This is their little game of keeping all my websites down right now. So just go on in. It's all safe. You know, it's just a smokescreen. Okay, so back to Judy Mikovits. Judy, gosh, your books have blown my mind, and I don't even know where to start with all that, but let's continue where we were. So now this company is taken over by these guys, and then you don't get any credit, and then 9/11 happens. What happened at that point?
Yeah, 9/11 happened, and then we continued to build everything, and then our work, this company was gobbled up by a bigger company. So my choice was to go to the bigger company, the corrupt company, in 2005 or 6, or I had met in November or the summer of 2005, as I mentioned. I met some of these very young women with this disease, ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and they were, I was looking at their immune system. These were people who had 800 SAT scores and were in Stanford, and when their brain wasn't firing, they couldn't add 2 and 2. And, I had perfect math SAT scores. And it was fascinating because you could see the neuroinflammation. And then we were doing, we knew how to do these blood tests, and we had all these, because that was what we did as a company, was make multiplex diagnostic tests. I had worked for a time, while the company was flailing. I had worked for a reagent company called BioSource, and that's where I learned a technology called Luminex, where you could do multiplex protein analysis. So you could look at a snapshot. Instead of one marker at a time, you could look at a signature of disease or a signature of infection. And this is that cytokine storm signature that is the disease COVID. So this is why we know SARS-CoV-2 does not cause COVID, because the disease is the inflammatory cytokine signature. And those are caused by lots of things. And in fact, one of those things is the retroviruses, and not just HIV, but also XMRVs. So, and these are the xenotropic, they were first shown in prostate cancer in 2006. So I turned down the job with the large cancer company, who were a bunch of criminals. And I said, no, I'm not going to, I'd done that before. I'd done that, been in the pharmaceutical industry, and I just wasn't going. So I wasn't, the last time I looked, at least at that time, we didn't have slavery in America. So they actually said they wouldn't buy the company unless I went and worked there, because nobody understood how to do this. But me and a guy named Zunda, who helped me, and he did the diagnostic and I did the therapeutic. So at any rate, so that was 2006, and I basically they did whatever they did with the company, took it over, stole it, took it to Northern California. It's in a town called Dublin or Pleasanton area. So I almost moved to Pleasanton.
Livermore Labs.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Where Kent worked, and so that was interesting how things work out. But anyway, so I had met these patients, and my heart was really to get back to the patients, like I had done all the way back in 1983 through 87 in the biological response modifiers program. And it's not rocket science. These two rich ladies asked me if I would be willing, said they'd pay me to heal their daughters, and I did.
Wow.
And unfortunately, we solved CFS in only 3 years using that systems biology approach, using those disease signature, using all my colleagues that did the best, my former collaborators at the NCI who could do the large data sets, who could do the multiplex technologies. We had no money, and I just put the collaborations together, and all I did was make sure they had the right patients, because
Right.
everybody who's tired just clearly doesn't have chronic fatigue syndrome associated with an
Were
infectious
were
agent.
their daughters, did they have chronic fatigue or did they have cancer? What did you cure for them?
It's interesting because it was chronic fatigue. I like to call it myalgic encephalomyelitis because it's
Right.
inflammation of the brain and the spinal cord. Because
Right.
remember, I said multiple sclerosis is associated with the expression of syncytin, your endogenous gamma retroviruses. So we knew this from 2004. We knew about the prostate cancer. I talked about my stepfather's family. We knew about these hormone-driven inflammatory diseases, and of course, my stepfather was in the military, heavily vaccinated, and in the Washington D.C. area, where we know a lot of patients who were injured. Or
Vaccine injured.
infected,
Yeah.
or infected content. We're not sure what they were doing. I'm not sure what was being released from labs all the way back in 2004 at Walter Reed
Well,
Armed Forces Institute.
yeah, I was just going to say, I'm a good
Yeah.
friend of Judy Very Baker. And I know the story going back to the
Yeah.
Cancer Research Center in New Orleans with
Yep.
Alt Noshner.
I can't read her book. It literally is like deja vu.
It is.
I cannot look at her book.
I know. You too. I mean, I swear to God, how is it that I met both of you and become friends with both of you? It's just so bizarre to me. I don't even get it. But
Well, God has a sense of humor, and there are
he
no
does.
coincidences, and there
He
are no
does.
accidents. So,
Well, I think because I became friends with Judith and we've known each other for a long time and I know her story and I absolutely believed her from the very beginning. She's very controversial. She had to leave the country. They tried to kill her so all these years. I mean, it's just been a crazy ride for her. But most
I
people
got the book. Somebody sent it to me, and I absolutely believe it. Years ago, maybe 2015 or 16,
Yeah.
they sent it to me, and
Oh yeah.
before our book ever came out. And this is really why. I mean, you absolutely see, all these chemotherapies. So they cause these cancers
That's
by
right.
expressing viruses out of mice and other animals, and then
That's
injecting them
exactly it.
in the vaccines, and then they use things like radiation, which we're seeing the radiation here. We're seeing things like aluminum. We're seeing things drop from airplanes. We know hepatitis B is a pararetrovirus. That means it's a hepatitis virus with a piece of a retrovirus in it that allows it to integrate and stay in your cells where these
That's
things are
right.
cleared. And this is what we know, and that came in on contaminated like protein, like albumins in some of these powders, in some of these foods. We know that they were dropping chlamydia out of planes, and
I
stuck to
Judy,
aluminum.
when I heard about the chlamydia coming out of the planes, I was like,
Yep.
how does that even work? Do you just breathe it in and then you've got it and then it expresses itself as an infection in your body later? I mean, how does that function?
Well, yeah, that's one way. I mean, think about it. It's on something that can't be broken down. It's a piece of a virus. So what are they doing with SARS-CoV-2? Oh, you breathe it in. They're crippling your immune system with the mask. You're
Right.
getting co-infections with bacteria. Now it's two masks. So you get twice as much bacteria and mold in your system. So you take out the other part of the immune system, which is why I keep saying this. And and so this is how this sense of humor, how it works is, remember mad cow disease over in
Oh,
Europe.
yeah.
It was very clear that prions were coming into people by way of contaminated bone meal
That's
from
right.
from cows.
Absolutely.
And so
Yep.
what do we have a problem with glyphosate? Oh, oops, little problem. I showed last year, I gave a talk up in Seattle, and I showed where in the veterinary industry, somebody published a paper, his sheep were all falling down. I remember the
Yes.
lentiviral diseases. I remember, think about MS, you're falling down. Think about the HTLV associated diseases. There's one called tropical spastic paraparesis, or HTLV associated myelopathy. And it used to be that the latency period between being infected and getting disease, the dormancy, that would take decades. And now there are some people in certain parts of Brazil, and where this was HTLV was endemic, when Frank and Bernie isolated it first, from Japan and Brazil, where Japan had the ATLs and Brazil had the neurological disease. So you see the cancer, and you see and you see the neurological disease in the different people. So these two young women had the neurological disease, but interestingly
Oh,
enough, the nephew, the man, the boy, in puberty, when the hormones, when the endocannabinoid system, when the immune system is full on,
right.
so the boy, the cousin of one of these women whose daughter was very ill, it's all in the book. He died of a very aggressive lymphoma cancer, blood
Oh, and
cancer.
how old was he when it happened
12.
to him?
12.
Oh,
And that
geez.
was the same time. The cousin and he, both at Lake Tahoe, both over the summer, both got sick at the same time. Puberty. Well, what are we doing with that deadly Gardasil shot? Boys and girls, puberty. It's in a
Wow.
lipid nanoparticle like the COVID shot. They're
Yep.
not vaccines. They're driving hyperinflammation. They're driving imbalances where your HPA, your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, is full on as you're growing. So you don't have time to develop and go back and do the neurological pruning in your brain if you have to put out all the fires. So you
Right.
never did you and I get vaccinated at puberty. Oh my God, how stupid is that? And never did you and I get vaccinated before we were 5 years old.
Right.
Whatever we did
Yeah.
get, we were walking and talking. So our detox machinery, that RNA cell, those pathways were all functioning. Our livers could detox, our kidneys could detox. And so we didn't
Well,
see autism, in
yes, but we did
ME/CFS.
see the polio problem. I mean, because the polio sugar cube or vaccine or whatever they
Yep.
were giving people, as Judy Baker says, is the problem for the cancer in all the baby boomers, because we all, or the late baby boomers, because we all got those sugar cubes with the monkey stuff
Yep.
on it. Yeah, monkey.
And
I don't know
the
what.
very
Yeah,
same monkey stuff we've got with the bat tissues now.
exactly. And so
Very same. And so that, what did Bill Gates say? Oh, get a polio shot. Of
exactly.
course you'll die sooner, guys. Wear
Yes,
two
exactly.
masks, get a polio shot, get a flu shot. Just keep doing it, folks, and you will kill yourselves. So
Yeah.
sooner or later, and I always say they've spent the last decade trying to kill me. I'm not going to assist them in my own suicide, because that's what's important about growing up in Washington, D.C. My
Yeah.
stepbrother, my stepbrother, the son of the father that died very young, of the aggressive prostate cancer associated with the XMRVs. His wife with the breast cancers. What can BRCA1, a gene? It's a DNA repair pathway. So viruses don't have editing function, so they mutate all the time, and they can recombine in every single fermenter. Those Vero monkey kidney cells do not have type 1 interferon. They do not have type 1 interferon. They're a manufacturing machinery, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. did a really great job in the forward to describe all of this. So he knew of all of it because he was working on RICO cases and still is. So this is what's so brilliant about the book, because we didn't know him, he didn't know us, he's busy, and but he agreed to write it. And then the book got delayed because he said, Judy, I wrote him one day an email and said, Bobby, how can I help? And he said, Judy, there's something missing. He's brilliant. And I said, Bobby, I know you're busy. Just read the last chapter. So I added a chapter to our book that was, maybe there's some, because the last chapter of Plague of Corruption should have been the way forward. Treatments, so all the cannabis, all the things I'm telling you right now, things like dimethylglycine to give yourself methyl donors, natural products, don't ever get another shot, use glutathione, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, harmless suramin, very, very low dose. What they did, peptide T, what they had done all this time was the same Fauci trick an FDA trick that he's doing in COVID. Oh, let's just make the healthy people sick with the masks.
Right.
And then that'll kill a certain percentage of the people with the XMRVs, the most vulnerable, the autistic kids, the MECFS. Oh, if they wear a mask for even a little while, you're done.
Yes, that's true.
It's the migraines, they're bedridden, they can't move, they're down for the count, and then they just call it long haul COVID, because of course you'll test positive, because wearing the mask and crippling your immune system will activate the dormant syncytin. And I guarantee you that PCR test has consensus retroviral sequence gamma retrovirus primers. So it has primers to pick up the syncytin. So you're actually the syncytin gene. So you're actually picking up your own expression of your endogenous viruses, and it's keeping them latent, which is key with the antiretroviral therapy.
So, okay, let me get this straight, because I have to keep up with you. You're always 6 miles ahead of me, Judy. So, so what you're saying is, just like I thought in the very beginning when I first met you, I told you I called my sister, who's an anesthesiologist, and she had worked in a virus clinic for years before she went to medical school to pay for medical school, right? And I called her up I first called her up after my dance partner died of AIDS, quote unquote. And she said to me, there's something wrong with this AIDS thing. This was back in the 90s when this happened, late 90s. And she goes, I haven't figured it all out yet, but, keep in touch or whatever. And we just let it go. But she basically said, I think it's a combination of many viruses, and people are just getting immune suppressed. And it's coming out in that as an expression of whatever they are immune suppressed from. Because they're dying from lupus, they're dying from this, they're dying from that, just like you were telling us. It isn't just one thing happening to these guys. It was major things of different ilk. So I called her later on when the COVID thing started, and I said, do you remember when we talked about AIDS? She goes, oh yeah, but the COVID thing, she goes, you don't have to worry about that, because we all have coronavirus in our bodies. Just like I was telling you back in the AIDS days, And I said, oh, so when they do a test, they're all going to find that we all have it. She goes, absolutely. So and then I met you, and you totally verified that for me.
Right, because they've been injecting them for years in these shots. And see, we almost all of us got the polio vaccine. And so this is why Bobby Kennedy's, and this is interesting because recently, I think we were called to talk to Minister Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam.
Oh,
And
I
we, as
didn't
several
know.
doctors, in mid-December, we were called because the Biden administration had called him, reached out to him, I should say, and wanted his blessing for the vaccine for the blacks, as if somehow this
Oh,
virus knew you were black or Hispanic.
right.
And it's literally written. I've got the publications in the slides that I showed him, from Children's Health Defense and things like this. And I'm like, and I was able at the scientific level to say, look, a virus doesn't know you're a black man, an IV drug user, a gay man, a prostitute. What a virus knows is what happens to your immune system. And if you're, you don't need an infectious transmissible virus if you've injected them. And this is what that Key Wolf paper showed, that in all the deadly stuff in all these flu shots. So how heavily the military, and back in the 90s, they experimented on the military with an
Oh,
HIV AIDS vaccine, and they gave them all vaccine um, that they gave them all HIV, and they were the synthetic versions, just like the synthetic version of the XMRV, the clone, the infectious molecular clone that Bob Silverman and Joe DeRisi made was called VP62. And the journals would only allow us to say an XMRV. That was the only one we could say was in our patients, because that was
huh?
the only sequence that Bob Silverman sequenced, because who had the patent?
Oh,
He and
that's right.
Abbott.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Okay,
So
now I
you
remember
start to
this.
see how many um, you see, and in these, some of these patients with Gulf War syndrome sent me their 23andMe genetics genome sequences.
Oh, now that's
and
interesting.
and the moms, they were desperate, their kids were sick, and the mom sent me their sequences and said, Judy, what is this? It says PNL43. It's an HIV clone straight out of the lab, the 5
Oh,
prime,
no.
only the envelope. Just like we see Luc Montagnier and some of these other in pandemic indoctrination, he talks about how there are GP120 sequences. We know there are XMRV envelope sequences, and all you need is the surface unit alone, that envelope, to cause the pathogenesis. So now in this new COVID gene therapy, chemotherapeutic kill shot, they're expressing HIV envelope, XMRV envelope, syncytin, and ACE2 receptors, which make, and then there's genes called TMPRSS2 that are more, that have single nucleotide polymorphisms. Those are biomarkers of a more aggressive prostate cancers, again
Oh, no.
associated with XMRVs. So the XMRVs were the first time that a virus was cloned before it was isolated, and now we know we spread it through all the vaccines from the laboratories, that the lab workers were getting sick. This is what I
Right.
showed you, that I got sick. I
Yep.
seroconverted. I got tons of little virus protein running around my little bodies. If I cough. I have pleurisy, lung disease, TGF beta, suppressor of cytokine signaling, to literally every mechanism that was the inflammatory cytokine signatures of disease, goes all the way back for that entire 40 years. What was stolen from my office, it was simply recreated. They took it out all the journals. They retracted it all, thought they got it all, except for the hero, my student Max, who caught them in the
Well,
act of their little Watergate style
oh,
break-in. So
God, I know.
they do
Uh,
the same thing all the time, and they think we're
now,
all stupid.
tell the audience a bit about what happened when you started getting arrested, because I don't think people understand what you've been through. I talk to people frequently and say, hey, I know Judy Mikovits, and they go, oh, well, I heard she was, this or that, and I have to straighten them out real quick, right? Of course I
Yeah.
am. And I say, you have no idea what they did to this woman. Why don't you read up on her and get her book? So yeah, I've been tempted to send your books that you gave me off to people that need an education, but that's okay. I'm gonna buy a stack of them and start just mailing them out these days, I think.
Well, what's a real frustration is that people don't want to know, and particularly in the medical community right now, what we've been really fighting, as you and I discussed, because of I'm so maligned, and I'm so my reputation destroyed, so heavily censored. You can't even get the mask book anywhere because, and then Tony Fauci gets stupider and stupider and keeps walking out there and saying, oh, it's wear 2 masks now. 1 doesn't work, no, 2 don't work either. And fortunately, people are figuring it out. And my nephew texted me and said, hey, Aunt Judy, I think next week we should all just put a plastic bag over our head and suffocate ourselves. It's a lot faster. So people aren't that stupid. So as shows like yours and things we're doing right now make people realize, people are unwilling to read the books. I have people literally was giving these away. And the mothers and to doctors' offices with radiation oncologists. No, you don't put your patient in a mask. You wear the mask to protect them from anything you drop into their chemotherapeutically crippled immune system. You destroyed their immune system. You put them in a silver or a copper mask, to prevent them from getting any kind of, and a total mesh mask. You don't have them impede their airways in any way, shape, or form, or they get hypoxia, and there's a transcription factor which is called hypoxia-inducible factor 1 alpha, and there are 3 or 4 of them, 1 beta, 1 delta, but this 1 alpha is in even 2 breaths. It's like turning this is an on-off switch, a transcription factor that's like a blowtorch on any cancer in your bodies, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of cysts. God. We're seeing a lot of cancer development, so, and again, milk thistle, just like in the days of HIV, clean out the liver and you won't get the disease. Use quercetin and berberine. These are the manuka honey with B vitamins. These are natural camel hump fat, as a drug delivery through your skin, goes through the blood-brain barrier.
Right.
With nanobodies that can regulate and restore the balance of your immune system. There are lots and lots and lots of natural therapeutics, and the doctors are waking up saying, and showing that ivermectin works. Well, why does ivermectin work? It's a horse pill. Oh, and if you look at it, it'll stop pigs from getting scrapie and all these things that our kids, what are our kids getting that, with the vaccines? Oh, foot and mouth disease. You don't get that in the developed country. Yeah, that's because going through that needle is mycoplasma, mold, Borrelia, Babesia, mycotoxins, everything that's in that lab and contaminating those cell lines, including the synthetic, the synthetic clone, PNL43, the N terminus of a synthetic clone of HIV. So we spread these things around the world in contaminated hepatitis B vaccines in the 90s. And they lie to you now and they say, oh, those aren't made of human blood. And we spread XMRV around the world because of Tony Fauci's arrogance and making it HIV has to cause AIDS so they can have all the money in their patents and all the $zillion in research. And now AIDS is gone and everything's gone. There's no cancer. There's no heart disease. There's no immunology in any journal that I read. Cancer cell immunity, cell host and microbe. It's all COVID. And let me remind you, COVID, the disease, COVID, the D means disease. The disease has nothing to do with SARS-CoV-2. The virus is gone, our own immune system. If you've got a healthy immune system, 99.8% of the people with any evidence of infection, even given the fraudulent PCR tests. And I keep saying it because that's what the PCR test for the XMRV was when Bob Silverman and Abbott bought the patent
Well,
rights,
that's
the
why I was
diagnostic
wondered.
companies. Right.
How can you patent something that may show up at one speed and not another? I don't understand that.
Well, again, you can't patent a natural virus.
Yeah,
So you
I
could
mean,
never patent our viruses. But
right,
and so the fact of the matter is that's why we knew the synthetic infectious
right.
molecular cone VP62 was weaponized, and it's
Yep.
in the Vero monkey kidney cells in our polio vaccines. I've got a 2011 paper that I'm looking at right now and giving to a colleague on a listserv who's trying to help. And it shows you the dozens and dozens of viruses that are including the VP62, the lab viruses of the XMRVs, along with 4 different of the natural isolates that are jumping species because we're injecting them. You do not need infectious transmissible viruses if you've injected their RNA or their DNA. So why would we inject the RNA of SARS-CoV-2 into every cell of the body? Why would that do anything other than kill people, which is exactly what it's doing? And what's really interesting about that is the people who have the most severe reactions right now are the people who have MECFS, autism, the 40 or 50 diseases I showed on that first slide, the 21st century acquired endocannabinoid immune dysfunction, the cancers I've been talking about,
Right.
the lymphoma, the leukemia, the brain tumors, the glioblastoma, kids with triple negative breast cancer. Oh, and they're in the military. They're heavily vaccinated. So you can see how you're waking up the dormant viruses. They're recombining with whatever's in the needle. And Sherry Tenpenny wrote an article, I think probably in 2004 or 5. And she said, what's in that needle can kill you. And I didn't know of her work. And in fact, I didn't know any of the vaccine connection until August 31st of 2014 when I met Brian Hooker. Dr. Brian Hooker, the star of the movie Vaxxed, is the one that dogged William Thompson and taped his confession that the CDC covered up that MMR caused autism 2 to 4 times more and other injuries and other things, cancers in blacks, if given to black boys before the age of 3 because of that, because in part of antibody dependent enhancement, pathogenic priming of the macrophages, and RNase-L, that biomarker from all those years ago, why black men and women get more aggressive breast and prostate cancers, why my stepfather and my and his first and second wives, they weren't black, but they were military, and this is contagious cancer, literally contagious cancer.
That's right.
And the lab workers, chapter 8 of our first book, oh my God, we can't afford to retrofit our labs. And what did they do that when they covered it all up between 2011 and 2011 and 2019? What did they do? They thought they had everything out of my lab. They thought they had all the samples. They thought they had all the data. They thought they had it all. And, it's so fun. It's like, gotcha. Because we wouldn't turn it. We up.
Yeah,
we would not lie. We were not cowards. The truth is the truth. That is a scholar's obligation in an age of corruption. Do not use statistics. Don't take all of the people with the, so for instance, in that Lipkin study of 2012, September 18th of 2012, when supposedly I couldn't replicate my own work. You know, they took a study that was, no, we could replicate our own work, because what did our first paper say? We're the first ever to isolate the virus.
I said that, facetiously. I know you can replicate your work, and absolutely. And these people are just lying about your abilities and what you discovered.
And they thought they covered it. They thought they got it all.
Yeah, exactly.
So they got everything I ever wrote. They got all my slides, and then they rewrote it. They got everything. They got all our computers, and they accused me of breaking in my office after I was fired and stealing everything to cover up that I made up XMRV. You know, the kind of stupidity in their story with what happened to me. I don't care what they call me. I don't care that I don't have credit. I don't care anything. All I care about is that it's very, very, very clear that, this COVID-19 is a cover-up. I don't want any single person to die. I don't want any single person, until they clean this up. Please don't get those shots. I'm ashamed of doctors who are walking around, friends of mine, on Facebook, on Facebook. Oh, get the shot. You're a hero. No, you're a dead hero. You're a dead hero. You know, or you've caused the disease. So isn't it interesting that, so what the big deal was about our work after our paper came out is it was almost instantly confirmed in the same patient population. And that was the paper by Shai-Xing Lo and Harvey Alter. And the paper was in PNAS, and it was held up. It was held up for like 6 months to a year, while they really quickly had the CDC do a crap study. Where they didn't, just like in the Thompson, take out all the people who weren't born in Atlanta. So remove all the blacks, and you would remove the signal that wouldn't remove any other way. So what they did, the data's gone. So that's what the Lipkin study was. We'll remove anybody with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, with any of the inflammatory signatures, with any of anything. And it would, in our first book, Kent wrote so clearly, it would be like trying to isolate HIV in 1990 and not using gays, IV drug users, or black men. But what did Shai-Xing Lo do? Yeah, exactly. You'd never find it in prostitutes.
That's right.
And so they said we didn't validate our work, but the only thing they would let us validate was the association. It was very clear we were the first, and they spun the paper. The journals tell you what you said, and that's not what we said. We didn't say an XMRV. They forced you to write that. I didn't want to write that, because it wasn't the truth. There were there was evidence all the way through the paper of many strains, but we let somebody else publish it. So Shai-Xing Lo saw our publication, and he took that box all the way from the 1980s and 90s. He'd kept in the freezer, never before thawed. And what was on the label of the box? Non-HIV AIDS. Why?
Wow.
It was CFS. It was immunological deficiencies, the NK, the T cell abnormalities, everything we saw, but no evidence of HIV. Clearly showing the blood supply had been contaminated for more than 30 years. Remember, he did this in 2010. This paper was published. And here's Harvey, and they did everything they could to say, oh, it's contamination. Oh, your PCR is contaminated. Oh, they're false positive. Remember that journal article?
Oh, God, I remember that.
With the big false positive. Why aren't you saying false positive now? With your PCR test that's not a diagnostic test. We actually confirmed it. We actually sequenced the positives. We actually did a completely unrelated second test, either Western blot like we did with HIV, or the serology, the antibody. Do you have an antibody, like you were saying at the top of the show? Because if you've already been affected and you already have an antibody, you're immune. And now we know if you get that COVID shot or that COVID test, you can develop. The COVID test is literally giving you nanobots and everything else, and giving you disease up in your nose. There's nothing about that is anything other than horrific. 97% false positive.
That's
So they're
right.
driving this, but they did it in the HIV days. They
Right.
would call
It's a
somebody
repeat.
positive
Yeah.
without Western blot and ruin many, many, many people's lives. And I saw it and I lived it. But what was the big deal about Chai-Shing Lo's little box? Oh, the blood supply was contaminated for 30 years. And the people that died in the earliest wave of AIDS were the people who had both HIV and XMRV.
That's right.
And they're dead because you can't, and now the people with just HIV don't get AIDS, and the people with sorry, somebody rang in. The people with HIV don't get AIDS because they get prophylactic treatments. They do the milk thistle. They're smart. They know how to keep. And you can even see the pre-exposure prophylactics on the TV, where we have these Truvadas and we have
that's
these.
right. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Don't give your lifestyle. We can reduce you down to undetectable. And yet they would never give these drugs. But in the end of our time at the Institute, the daughter, Andrea Whittemore, got these drugs, and she got well, and she got her life back, along with the natural products. It's all, not only you have to use them low dose, you have to use them correctly, and the Whittemores were producing in one of their companies a fraudulent, unvalidated, un-FDA approved test and charging Medicare. Well, look at the fraud with this criminal test. Every one of these doctors are criminally liable for using that test and for treating people when you don't sequence what's in the middle of it. So Professor Cahill showed last week. She's in Ireland. She showed last week.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet. I heard about it. I haven't had time to watch it. What did she say, Judy?
Well, what she said was, show us sequence the synthetic mRNA. We want to know what it is. It's not SARS-CoV-2. And then in the PCR test, sequence positive. So what they were able to do is they were able to get autopsy samples. They were able to get samples of people who died with it. And when they sequenced the PCR product, they got influenza. And what did the government do in 2004? A publication at Fort Detrick, at USAMRIID, and the military group at Walter Reed outside of D.C. What did they do? Oh, they cloned the Alaskan people who died from the Spanish influenza.
That's right.
And they put that in vaccines. They have that in the labs, and they're spreading it through the labs. And now people are saying, wait a minute, there's an Alaskan strain of COVID. When are we, the people, going to wake up?
Right.
Because many, many people are going to die if we don't get these people fired. Treason, stop all of this and hold those accountable. And this is what it was, a council with Fulmike, Reimer Fulmike. It was a legal council over in Ireland about what's being done, the fraud in the testing, the fraud in the shot, the inoculation. Right. And this is what David E. Martin showed also. We showed it on the line in the sand with Rocco Galati, Bobby Kennedy Jr., me. And so, this is the value of all of these of all of these shows
Let me,
that we
Judy,
do.
if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is I'd like to run through the list of these movies for people listening if they haven't seen them yet.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you probably 50% of my audience has, but maybe the other 50 hasn't. So could you list the movies again and just slowly so they can write them down and get to watch them tonight?
Oh, sure. Well, you can start with Plandemic.
Okay.
And you can find that at plandemicseries.com
Okay.
or freedomplatform.tv. And that was on Plandemic Indoctrination was the star David Martin, fabulous.
And that's the second in the series,
Correct.
correct?
That's August 18th of 2020. The first one was May 4th of 2020, but I believe they're both on plandemicseries.com still. Many are on BitChute. You can also see, so August 19th on freedomplatform.tv/Willis, you see Mickey Willis. And what's really interesting about Mickey Willis, the filmmaker for Elevate Films, who made the original one, it was supposed to be a promotional video for Plague of Corruption. Because of course our book was delayed because Bobby didn't quite understand that last little piece. So it was delayed all the way to April 14th of 2020. And of course,
which was perfect timing, by the way.
Well, you know, they knew in November they'd grab the manuscript. They knew it. That's why the event 201, that we don't have time to make our killer virus. So we've got to we just got to use the common cold, SARS-CoV-2. And anybody with a healthy immune system will cripple it all up. So now they've got their killer virus because it's in the form of something they're calling a vaccine. And they're injecting the synthetic RNA of the 3 viruses in everybody's cells. They know they'll get antibody-dependent enhancement for anybody that's ever gotten a flu shot, because every flu shot has all those coronaviruses and the wolf paper. So anyway, so if you go to freedomplatform.tv/Willis, Mickey talks about filmmaking after 9/11, and it's mind-blowing.
Really?
From August 19th, yes, because, remember, I'm talking about when my company went down. I'm talking about never let a good disaster go to waste, how they tacked the anthrax onto it and killed Bruce Ivins and blamed him for all of it, like they blamed me and tried to suicide you. Yeah. So while that's what, the first chapter after Bobby's forward, was Scientist at Sea. And you asked me to tell your audience about escaping, and they surrounded my house in the middle of the night. That's what Mickey kind of showed a little bit. And it wasn't quite real, because when they arrested me, it was Friday, November 18th, because we escaped on the boat that day. But Mickey didn't quite understand the 2 stories, that the jailing wasn't the day we escaped on the boat. So he kind of took, but it didn't matter. Both events happened. They surrounded my house at 4 a.m. that was the day I would have been killed, and I escaped. And so on the 18th, they had to simply jail me. And because we had caught them by then, we knew what they did, and we knew what was going on. We had no idea.
Had you threatened to go public with this, and that is why they had such an adverse reaction and threw you in prison or jail or whatever?
Oh no. They were the one that filed a lawsuit. They fabricated a crime under the direction of Tony Fauci, and they were paid. They were paid in the grants. To this day, the University of Nevada gets tens of millions of dollars of grants. Think about, and they're using the epigenetic work. They're saying SARS-CoV-2, and they're just literally recreating our work because they thought they got everything in our lab. No, they thought they planned the perfect crime. So they filed a civil lawsuit with affidavits from Harvey Whittemore, Mike Killerby, Annette Whittemore, and Lombardi. And it was pure lies, and you could see in it how they planned the crime. And they had no idea that Max caught them in the middle of the crime.
Now, Max had held back all of your paperwork around your research. Is that correct?
No, Max found they were in my office the night I was fired. They locked down the
Okay.
labs to all my students. So he looked in my office. The door was cracked open, and my two desk drawers with the names of the patients associated with the numbers.
Ah,
Every single thing in my laboratory was coded. The only one who knew who was the person behind the data of thousands of patients was Judy Mikovits. And they were in two desk drawers, and there was another notebook where I could prove that Lombardi fabricated his little diagnostic test and lied and said and misappropriated federal funds. And I fired him very quickly in August. You don't lie to me twice.
right.
Because if you so much don't write something down, a mistake in your notebook, you're fired in my world. Always has been. It's an easy way, and all my students know that. And so those, I had stuck two papers in a notebooks when Harvey Whittemore sat in front of me and in August and was threatening me. And he sat there and pretended like, well, we'll take care of them. We'll take care of the bad guys. And they were literally setting it up in August of 2011 because I had caught them, and you could see he was looking for where's the information. He did not know. And so there were only two desk drawers in my entire office that were disturbed, and that was that. So it was literally a grocery bag full of information. That was the proof beyond a shadow of a doubt of every word I said. And Max captured them. So the good news is they couldn't do anything because my criminal lawyer at the time, after I was forced back to Nevada, after the judge in Ventura said, no, we can't hold her and she doesn't have to go and she's committed no crime. Then I was forced on the phone, and that's all in our first book, Plague,
Right,
to
right.
to to
Yeah.
go back to Reno and turn myself in. And I didn't turn myself in. I was told I was going there to meet with this lawyer whose name was Scott Freeman, who quickly got made a judge when I proved my total innocence in
Oh
March
my
of
God.
2000. Yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
God.
And was taken off my case. And I was threatened by the other lawyer, Tammy Riggs, and we'll go after these people. I mean, they will go to prison. I guarantee you, if they hear me, Judge Tammy and Judge Scott, you can't do that. We gotcha.
Exactly.
So this is,
Uh,
this is the whole thing. But okay, so
okay. Well, there we go, Judy.
lineinthesand.us.
Yeah, the show's over. I can't believe it. They're actually playing my music for me now. They fixed
Okay.
it. So this is great. Well, thank you so much. I hope everybody's got their ears full today. And get Judy's books. Just get online. Plague of Corruption. Look her up. She's amazing. Thank you, everybody. Good night.